Hey, Joe Gilder here from Home Studio Corner, talking again about the Presonus StudioLive. Specifically, how do we set it up with Studio One, the recording software, so that everything shows up the way you expect it to show up? Let's dive in. Okay, we're inside of Studio One. There are lots of ways to set this up, and I'm actually going to show you just a really quick and dirty, just hands-on way to do this, because that's the way that works well for me. If you go to create a new song, they have a tab here for interfaces. So you could go down and pick a StudioLive interface, but I found those don't actually set it up like I would want it to be set up. So let's create an empty song and let's set it up from scratch so you can see how to do it, and then you can customize this however you want. First thing you gotta do is open up the mixer window using F3, come over here to the left-hand side and click on this I/O button. That's gonna pull up this grid. And this grid, the first time you load it in, might actually look something like this. These are the inputs, and then your outputs might literally just have a main output. And that main output will probably be routed to just channels 1 and 2. Now this is, if you've used any DAWs in the past, this is a pretty normal looking thing. We've got inputs. These are inputs from the mixer itself. It actually has 32 inputs plus a bunch of extras. It's ridiculous how many inputs it has that you can assign to channels in your DAW, and then the same number of outputs as well. The inputs is where I really want to focus here for a minute. There's a couple ways to set this up. First off, you can set up a bunch of mono inputs. I would suggest setting up one for each channel on the board. So at most, I'm going to be recording 24 microphone inputs at a single given moment, and I want to have separate channels for each. So this is literally when I go to open up, create a new track in Studio One. Let's do that real quickly. If I hit N for new track, what is it? T for new track. It's an acoustic guitar, and if I come down here, sometimes they hide, we have to open them up, and I go to input, these are my inputs that I have available to me. The word on the left, input 1, is the name that was in that menu that I just showed you, and then it says dash, and it shows the actual name of the channel on the interface. So for example, what that means is I can have, let's say I've got this input 3 is channel 3. You can leave it like that. I like to leave it like that because it's simple, but there's a couple of channels on my board, like for example, my ADL 700 is plugged into channel 14. So I can actually change this to ADL 700. Now if we save that, if we apply that and then go back to this channel over here and we go to select an input, now look, I can find my ADL 700 and not have to remember every time what channel it's on. But also I can still see it's on channel 14, but the name of the input has been changed to ADL 700. On my usual system, I've got inputs for my Avid 11 rack, inputs for my keyboard rig, all my preamps, and even the mic I'm speaking into. A lot of times I'll label it something like VO for voiceover, so I just know quickly and easily which inputs I'm using and which ones I'm not. And you can always come in and change these. There's no reason not to. Now, the other thing you might want to do is add some stereo inputs. So right now, if I created a stereo track, let's say this acoustic guitar that we're recording, we want it to be stereo. Well, let's change it to a stereo track, which we can do up here, doink. And now it's a stereo track, but look, if we go to select inputs, we actually don't have any stereo inputs. It's only these mono inputs that we've created. That's a problem. So we're gonna come over here to our I/O setup under inputs, and now we clicked add mono 24 times. Now we're gonna click add stereo 12 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think that was enough. Okay, so now you can see we've got more inputs that come in just below 24. Problem is, it just continued them down this way. That's not what I want. I want it to be like this. Basically, I want inputs 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, so on and so forth, to be grouped together, so I have the option of both stereo and mono inputs. Now, is that a little bit annoying that you have to do this sort of manually and it doesn't just default to knowing these things? Yes, it is a little bit annoying, but I'm okay with it. It just is what it is. But now, if I go to open up this stereo channel here and select inputs, now I've got mono inputs up here, I've got stereo inputs down here, and the way we know they're stereo is because it says channel 1 plus 2. Now, if you're really a bit of a perfectionist like I am, you're going to want to come rename all of these down here so they're appropriate. So this one I would call input 1-2. And the next one I would change to 3-4, so on and so forth. And then this one, down here that's plugged into the outputs of my Avid 11 rack, I might name this one 11 rack, and that'll show up as a stereo input into my DAW. Okay? The other side of this, now this can get as complicated as you want or as simple as you want, but remember, when you start working on songs, they're going to basically, you want to save this as a template and use this as your starting point for all your new songs. And the problem is if you don't take the time to set this up well, you'll have to go in every song you create and add all of these things, and that's a little bit annoying. Now, for the outputs, there's not nearly as much that you need. Really starting out, if you're mainly just recording into your DAW and want to play it back, then your main output, which is like your master fader in Studio One, can come down any channel that you want. I've got mine set up to come out channels 1 and 2. It's a stereo channel here, but you can have as many as you want. In sessions, for me, I don't have very many outputs set up because I don't use a lot of it, but it's right here if you ever need to get to it. And when you're done with your changes, just click apply and OK. Okay, so that's the simple, quick and dirty way to set up the StudioLive with Studio One. It actually works pretty much any DAW software I've used in the past, Logic, Pro Tools. They all have a version of this that's some sort of a grid that allows you to assign the physical inputs on your interface to maybe a more virtual channel on the left-hand side. And you can name them and do things like that. So it's worth taking the time, be a little bit of a nerd early on, set it up how you want it to be set up, go to work, make some music, and then as you learn your workflow and change things, you can always go back and change how you have this set up. This is probably, I've probably done this setup at least a half dozen times and gotten little bits of improvement as I go. It's all part of the process. Thanks for watching. See ya.